Hi there, I'm Daniel, and this is the Interactive Design and Prototyping Enrichment video series. As mentioned in a previous video, a big part of your class project is building a working prototype of your system design. A lot of students spend too much time building these prototypes, so we have set up some software that will help you to quickly get up and running. Today I'm going to be showing you a custom Backend as a service application that we've built to help you with that. In this video, I'll be building a simple web-based group to-do list application, then show you how I quickly implement a backend for this application using the backend as a service we are providing. The best way to start off is visit chrisbosch.github.com/awesomestart. Click fork on GitHub and fork this project onto your own GitHub account using the fork button. Once you have a copy, clone the repository onto your computer, and let's get started to building our first basic application that makes use of the create, retrieve, update, and delete functionalities of this backend as a service. Open up the index.html file in the static folder for editing. The first thing we are going to do is to delete all the HTML code in the body from the line that begins "put your own HTML code after this line" at line 197 of this file, all the way to the bottom of the page where it says "your own HTML code would end here." At my file it's line 344. Then we are going to add our own HTML code inside. I've prepared a simple HTML web page built entirely using Twitter Bootstrap, which you can find the link to in the YouTube description or from the IS306 wiki page. Let's have a quick look at this page. It's a simple task list application that allows you to create, edit, and delete tasks. You can see that each task has a name, a person who created it, and a person who is doing it. I'm going to paste the code for this page inside the body right now. If you have the file, you'll see that I'm copying only the parts between the "code starts here" and "code ends here" commands. Next, we're going to create our own API key. Backend as a service can be used by anyone on the internet, and it relies on a unique API key to differentiate every app that is using it. To set your API key, edit the scope.api value in the backend controller JavaScript function, which is in line 47 of my file. We recommend using your email address as your API key to make sure that it is unique. The backend as a service stores all objects in a collection called a model. Every API key can have multiple models, each of which is accessed by a name. We can specify the model we want by changing the scope.model value in backend controller, found in line 54 of my file. In our case, we are calling our model task, and it will store the tasks in our to-do list app. When the web page loads, backend controller will call its list function, which is found at line 176 of my file, which loads the entire model from the server into the items variable. After we do this, all the objects in the model will be accessible through the array items.entities. This items variable will only be accessible within the scope of the backend controller. But we put the controller on the whole body of the page, so that covers just about everything. Adding objects to the model is really simple. The backend as a service has also created a variable called item that we can use to add, view, or edit objects in the model. Let's go to the task editor form at the bottom of the page and add the ngModel attribute to the input elements. We'll use item.data.user for the created input element, item.data.task for the task name input element, and item.data.who for the owned input element. This binds the input elements to the fields of the current item object. Now we can add and modify items in our model through the backend controller's add and update methods. Let's use the ngClick attribute to link JavaScript actions to our buttons. For the add new button, we will set this attribute to add, which will add the current item to the model. For the save button, we will set this attribute to update open bracket item open square bracket id close square bracket close bracket, which will save all changes to the current item. Note that the update method has one parameter, the ID of the object to modify, which we can access through item square bracket ID. This ID is set automatically after an object is added to the model. And that's it, we've now implemented the form. Notice how we didn't actually have to implement any connections to a backend object? That is because the backend as a service will create new objects and fields if they don't already exist and update them if they do. Smart, isn't it? We'll now implement the displaying part of the application. Our application will need to iteratively add the values into this table. To do that, we go into the table, identify the HTML code that needs to iterate, in our case, the tr tag, and add an ngRepeat attribute to it. ngRepeat works like the for loop function in Java or Python. In our case, we want it to iterate over every object saved in items.entities. So we will define the value as entity in items.entities. Next, we will print the values of each item in the table. AngularJS can do that if we use curly brackets. The first column is the name of the task, so we type curly bracket entity.data.task. The second is for the person who created the task, so we enter curly bracket entity.data.user. And the final column is for who's doing it, so we use curly bracket entity.data.who. Once again, we will implement the JavaScript actions to the buttons in table row. The edit button will call the load bracket entity ID, which loads the object in this row into the item object, where our form expects it to be. The delete button will call delete entity ID, which deletes the object from the model. Both actions accept the object ID as a parameter, which we are passing using entity square bracket ID. And that's it. Now we can add new items, load them to a form, edit them, and even delete them. And all this data is stored persistently in a server somewhere, ensuring that anyone who loads this page will see the data. Thanks to this backend as a service, we've built a web-based team to-do list without writing a single line of code. In fact, we only wrote a few short lines of code altogether. If you'd like to know about the other functionalities available, you can refer to the notes at the top of the JavaScript in this file. I'll close now with 3 final steps for using the backend as a service. First, if you'd like to view all the data stored in your API key, you can visit chrisbosch.github.com/awesomestart, scroll to the bottom of the example app, and tick the checkbox to turn on the debugging tool. Once you've entered your API key, you'll see all the data stored in the backend. Second, I said that you can store any objects you want in your model, but it's generally easier to use the backend as a service if all objects in a model have the same type. If you want your web page to use more than one model, then you should use 2 instances of the backend controller and initialize them to use 2 different models. You can see an example of this at plunker.co/edit/cnvyg. Finally, the code we've given you uses the backend as a service that is hosted at codecomparison.appspot.com, as referenced in line 41. If you look closer at the Awesome Start project we began with, however, you'll notice that the root directory contains some code that we didn't use in this video. If you want complete control of the front end and back end, you can install everything on Google App Engine as your own application and run your own version of this backend as a service. So that's a quick run through of the backend as a service. Let us know if you have any questions.